Join me as I brainstorm our next mystery plotting game while playing Cozy Bookshop. We're going to work on a game, and I thought that the theme for next week's game could be May Day. If you aren't familiar, it is a spring holiday of sorts. I always used to celebrate it when I was a kid, giving away May baskets, little paper cones we'd staple together and put treats or flowers in. Kind of got a Midsummer, the movie, vibe to it a bit. Yeah, flowers, a giant maypole with ribbons around it. Anyway, thought it would be a nice hook for a spring cozy mystery. And this time, when working on my project, I wanted the first complication to have to do with weapons. We haven't really used weapons yet or explored that in the mystery plotting game. And so I thought we could have a dice roll or close your eyes and pick one. I try to make these games as easy to play as possible. And I even offer a recording of the game if somebody wants to walk or run errands or clean and listen. But I think we would be okay including a random choice between three different weapons. I wanted to do the classic cozy weapon, which is poison. And then I wanted to include two weapons that would cause a player to need to make different plotting choices for the mystery. The weapons that I thought of were maybe there's a giant, heavy ceremonial spear, and the victim could have been tied to this decorative maypole and then killed with the giant spear as the second weapon choice. And I'll go in a little bit as to why I thought that. And I brainstormed this before I started this recording, obviously. So if you're playing along and wondering how I came up with that off the top of my head, if you're trying to brainstorm with me, maybe you're at work brainstorming a different problem. Maybe you're brainstorming a project that's similar with me. I thought of that while running errands earlier today. So that did not just come out of nowhere. And then we could have the third weapon. Perhaps the victim was choked to death with a ceremonial necklace. So I'm thinking a necklace with like chunky painted wooden beads. Now, I've seen this somewhere. I don't know where, if it was a mystery TV show or a Golden Age detective book, but the beads would leave marks on the neck that could be mistaken for fingerprints if the villain had removed the weapon. But why I wanted to create this complication is I haven't done anything with weapons yet. It is randomly generated, so it increases the replayability factor for this particular week's game. And the weapon that you end up with causes plotting concerns because obviously poison is most likely premeditated, depending on how you choose to set it up. If it is a poison that is readily available, for example, poisonous flowers such as foxglove, and there are plenty of people in this May Day ceremony who are gardeners and who would know how to somehow extract that and turn it into a poison. And foxglove is being included in the May Day baskets. This is all very cozy mystery and it's fitting our May Day hook. But most likely, poison needs to mean the murder is premeditated. And now you could play with this, and this might be a complication for day 2 through 6 that we're going to need to brainstorm later. I would think the spear with the victim, tied up to the maypole somehow and speared, it's very heavy. That means you need to think about who could have lifted this object, who could have had the strength to tie up the victim to the maypole. It creates a lot of interesting mystery construction problems, which that's part of the fun of this role-playing game is to need to solve them based on a complication that's created by rolling a number 2, for example, which would give you the spear and the maypole is wearing around their own neck. It could be a weapon of convenience. It could indicate, especially if you chose to have this murder weapon removed from the scene of the crime, the necklace. There's marks on the neck that look like they could be fingerprints. That creates some complications because if you are starting out with a suspect who does not seem strong enough to use either of these weapons, it just creates some interesting plotting opportunities within the game. Also, it kind of indicates those last 2 weapons that the murder wasn't premeditated. And so I think we're going to see, I'm just brainstorming now, on the consecutive days of complication that rightly would be introduced, which is if you got those 2 weapons and it wasn't premeditated, I would assume there needs to be a catalytic event that happened that made someone freak out and commit this crime. They're also going to have to spend time trying to cover up the crime. That is a whole different mystery plot. And so I think that's interesting. I think what we're doing with the weapons is interesting. So I'm going to mark down those 3 weapons are going to be the first daily complication. In the past, I have had the game player create all of the suspects. I think in this case, I want to start off the mystery with 6 different characters. And we are going to choose the victim, but we're going to twist that later. That's going to be a complication for later. And so we're going to pick the characters because there's going to be a lot of work done around the weapon and the fact that this is clearly not a premeditated crime in the cover-up. So let's brainstorm our victim and our villain, and then we have 6 additional suspects. So this sounds like something where we could have a local gardener involved, a nursery, a gardening club. For outside, May, typically anywhere in the United States at least, might be rainy and a bit muddy if you're in the Midwest. Typically, it's going to be pretty warm. So this is going to be taking place outside. If we have all of the staging near the maypole, obviously anyone is going to be able to get access to this. So let's imagine this is in a town center, a town square, a town park. I think a park is going to be better. Now, these are just mystery games, and a lot of people play these for fun. It's people that like brainstorming, some people that like mysteries. Some writers do choose to write stories based off of this, but I think we're going to make it a little easier on ourselves, presuming we are the mystery writer. And we are going to say that this is going to take place in a park, town square, too many people walking by. It's kind of a mess. That could indicate, though, okay, that's interesting. Now I'm getting another thought. Maybe it is in the town square and it could be, how did the body get there? Was it perhaps planted there by someone? I need to think on that a little bit. So we have the scene of a crime. It's the May Day celebration. We know we have someone related, at least one person related to the flowers. I would say one person needs to be the committee leader. This is going to be somebody running around with a clipboard who's probably extremely obnoxious, as they tend to be. even if they mean well in a cozy mystery. We also could have the victim be someone being honored in a small town. Let's make them a man because it's going to make it a little bit more interesting, I think, with the weapons, as this is someone who, in theory, is going to be physically stronger. Again, we're playing with our weapons, and how does changing the weapon change your mystery based on who could have possibly even used the weapon? So we have that set up. This has got to be somebody who's made everyone incredibly angry. So someone who's come back to town, perhaps. I don't think they could have left when they were as young as high school age, because how many people could they really have made that angry? So maybe it's someone who, let's make it a real estate developer. In our world today of cozy mysteries, anyone involved in real estate development is probably, it's easy to make them someone who has made a lot of people angry. So perhaps this is a person who conned the town out of, let's say, a large grant to fix up part of Main Street, we'll say, and they kind of just took the money and ran. They were a bit of a con artist. And now they're back. They've made even more of a fortune in the big city nearby, and they want to become a part of the town. And let's say the mayor and the city council have decided that they're going to honor them as the Mayday King as opposed to Mayday Queen, which is the more traditional. But lots of people that have grudges. So there could definitely be a former business partner, and we can overlap these two. The former business partner probably isn't the mayor or the town council. Or they could have a champion on the town council. Let's make that a cousin, let's say, who perhaps the cousin owns a construction company. And this person could be someone who benefits from the developer coming back in town, who's going to restart some projects. And this is kind of, as far as our suspects go, the least likely suspect, someone who's going to be grieving the deaths. That gives our game players a lot to work with, because this is someone who could have a hidden motive. We could have a former ex-spouse. Let's say that is the Parks and Recreation manager, who certainly would have had access to the grounds. I'm doing this is trying to bring in complications if you have a heavy spear for a weapon, which is hard to pick up. And how did you get him tied up to the pole? Even the beaded necklace, that might be very difficult to work with. But right now, let's finish up our suspects. Let's see. So somebody involved with gardening. Let's make that a man. So that's 3 people already. Let's have it be the town mayor, who is going to seem extremely suspicious because they're going to put a lot of pressure on the police and our cozy mystery sleuth to just solve the case, because this is very bad PR. We can give this mayor, though, also a former relationship. Perhaps they were extremely embarrassed and lost their mayoral position before because they greenlit this real estate developer's Main Street project, which then went bust, and they had to fight to earn their political career back. And they are very savvy to what it looks like externally. And so that's an interesting suspect to have, but they could definitely have a separate motivation. So I believe we have 4 now. So we have the mayor, we have the cousin, who is the owner of the development company that certainly stands to benefit financially and also has family ties to the victim. A man who owns a landscaping company, that person could certainly be disgruntled. Perhaps their company almost went bankrupt when the victim walked away from their prior project. Or let's make it, it could be even just their family's company. This is a small town. That would not be unusual. Almost went bankrupt. We have to have an ex, someone who was their ex. Let's make that the planner with the clipboard. Who is planning this festival? They are beholden to the mayor. We could also have another ex who is the Parks and Recreation Director, who would have access and who is seen arguing with this man. I think there could be something really interesting when playing the game in their background about perhaps toxic chemicals dumped on the land, and perhaps this person used to be involved and looked the other way. So we have our 6 potential suspects. I want to say 4 of them are less likely that they would have had the strength to use the second 2 weapons, at least alone, without the help of someone else. Or, well, maybe there's some creative ways that our game players could think of when plotting this mystery. I can think of one right now, that strength would not really have come into it if you were clever. All right, so we've already set that up for our game players. Now we need to move into the complication for day 2. We've already done the weapon, which has set our game player off on a path. Day 2's complication, I think, should be that someone, okay, I just thought of this, but this has to be further back. Let's create an additional complication where it could be a call from the editor, and the task is that we have to add a middle schooler as a potential suspect. This is creepy, very Agatha Christie. So this is another person that we have to make it seem like originally is our major red herring. So this is the challenge for anyone playing the game. How could you make a middle schooler look like they are the primary red herring? Such a creepy twist. And again, another person, depending on which weapon you got, who might have a hard problem working with weapon number 2 or 3 by themselves anyway. Interesting complication. Day 3, we have another twist. Someone confesses. At this point, the child is the major red herring. Probably a couple of directions. If you're playing this game, you could go with this, but so day 3, someone confesses. Why are they really the killer in the end? And why would someone confess if they didn't do it? Day 4, another twist. A hidden motive is discovered. What I think we should build off the confession and close that out where, yeah, we have to close out the confession. So day 4 should be, why did the person confess? Who were they hoping to eliminate from suspicion? And are they really guilty? And is that their ploy to make themselves look not guilty and remove themselves from suspicion? Both of the men have been removed from suspicion. Congratulations. If you had one of the men be the confessor, because you made your job a little easier. If not, both men are removed from suspicion. So you need to think of a plausible way that the remaining suspects, who may not have had the strength, if you have weapon number 2 or number 3. Oh, so now I'm thinking about this, and we need to make all 3 weapons difficult weapons of convenience. It's not as fun if you rolled a 1 and there's nothing that you have to deal with here. Because the whole issue on day 4 is going to be you have to figure out how the remaining suspect, even if you don't know who the killer is yet, because remember, this time we did not give away the killer in the beginning, which is a twist from what we've been doing in the past. We've only given away the suspects. So the killer themselves has actually been changing for our game player. We're going to have to keep brainstorming a third weapon of convenience. That would be potentially difficult for someone who doesn't have a lot of size or strength as compared to the victim to use. I mean, there's a crown of flowers. It's, again, gruesome for a cozy mystery, but perhaps they're tied up in the maypole ribbons. Okay, let's use that. They're tied up in the maypole ribbons and they're kind of hanging there. Again, somebody with strength would have needed to do this. So now I think we get to day 5 and we need to consider another twist that a secret romantic relationship with the victim is going to come out. I think this, if you are very astute already at plotting mysteries, you will see as the logical explanation. We might even give a hint here. What we are getting at is the fact that perhaps in the example of the weapon, which involves the victim being tied up to the pole, perhaps the victim in a saucy situation agreed to tie themselves up or be tied up by somebody who they were romantically involved with. That would explain how someone without the physical strength was able to overpower this person, the victim, and tie them up or suspend them. Perhaps it is something where the victim did it themselves. And I think we'll leave a couple hints. If you're using any of these other items with leverage, they could be used much easier by somebody with, for example, a ladder. If we had a ladder around near the maypole, which could be happening. If we are talking about, especially the Parks and Rec person might have access to that fairly easily to get some leverage to use any of these weapons. The spear could be rested on the ground, kind of in like a triangle where it's pressing against the victim. That is a way that someone who is not as physically strong could get more leverage without having to actually fully lift up this heavy wooden spear. All these are interesting challenges when you consider how a weapon and if the murder was premeditated or not changes how you're going to plot out a mystery. And actually, I think that we should make this for day 6. That makes a lot of sense because for day 5, we need to pick what is one thing, at least one thing that the villain has done to try to make other people look guilty. For example, if the beaded necklace was removed, could they have planted it somewhere else where it would be easily found? And the key is very easily found. Why would the villain do that and leave it around? Obviously, that's something that the sleuth could figure out. That's a good plotting device. Okay, so I think that we have all 6 of our challenges. We have all 6 of the suspects, plus the suspect that we added that was the teenager. We are not prescribing who actually did it in this case. It's is a replayable plotting game, so it's all up to however you can make the mystery fit if you are playing it. We just need to come up with a third weapon as a choice because I realized it is simply no fun if you are the person who picks poison, because so much of the mystery hinges upon the fact of like how done it, which is a type of mystery where you want to try to figure out, similar to a locked room mystery. It doesn't seem like any of these remaining suspects could have actually done this and gotten this person tied up on this pole. So I hope listening to this brainstorming session helped you in your own brainstorming, or if you're brainstorming along with me to get the start of plotting your own mystery. Again, when I create these mystery games, I like to put a lot of the stuff in place already because these are shorter mini games and it's faster and more fun to plot out when I've already made all these decisions for you. Maybe someday I will make a whole plotting game from scratch, doing what we just did here, plus along with all these challenges to finish up all the clues and the whodunit aspect. But for now, I'm choosing to put the basic foundation in place and then letting players have fun with just finishing up plots that I've already given them a lot of structure. Okay, if you feel like playing this one, I think I'm going to call it Maypole and May. We'll see, and I will probably be finishing up the game and putting it out next week. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for plotting along with me